Hey guys, what's happening? So now we're jumping back into Kingdom Black, and with doing so, we're getting into Daredevil. And my first thought is like, if anybody know how to fight in the dark, it should be this guy. So I'm super interested to see how this pans out with Matt Murdock. So let's get into this. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get your spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so the way that Daredevil issue 26 starts off, with it tying into Kingdom Black, Matt Murdock is in prison. So before we go any further, I want to talk about like how this happened and why he's here, because going forward, a lot of stuff is not going to make sense if I don't. So now, at the beginning of Daredevil volume 6, in issue 1, he had made his way to stopping a few guys from robbing the liquor store, and in the process, one of the dudes, a guy by the name of Leo Carrero, he had taken an elbow to the chin, which then had sent his head crashing into the wall, only for it to be revealed later that he had ended up dying in the hospital. And so now, with the murder charge hanging over Daredevil's head, on one hand he wanted to turn himself in, but then also there's a bit of a conflict because he just couldn't let Hell's Kitchen go under. So with this happening, initially he agreed to take it to trial, with the case being made that these charges were being put on Daredevil and not Matt Murdock, which was something that was only possible because superheroes could show up as witnesses in order to protect their identities and loved ones, which then worked around the loophole for him to be tried wearing a mask. But even with doing so, he showed his identity to the district attorney, so there's that. But also in a way of kind of preparing for the worst, like in the case if he loses and Daredevil gets locked away, he still had the issue of the Stormwinds, who are trying to lower the property value of Hell's Kitchen so that they can then buy it out and use the whole thing as a front. So Daredevil then went to Tony Stark, and with doing so asking him to spend billions of dollars, like it ain't nothing, to buy Hell's Kitchen out, but with doing so it would kind of raise the bid higher than what the Stormwinds would want to pay. And Tony agreed to do it, but the bid was bought out by a shell company before Tony could secure the purchase, which then left Daredevil in this place of kind of like, now he can't go to jail because Hell's Kitchen still needs him. And if now the Stormwinds are in control of everything, then Hell's Kitchen's gonna need him even more. So at this point, he needs to either win the case or just prolong it for as long as possible. But when he goes in, Elektra, she whispers from the back of the courtroom, knowing that only he can hear it, and she tells him that she bought out Hell's Kitchen. And with her doing so, she told Murdock that now he's free to do what he feels like he needs to do, which in his case was then to plead guilty to second-degree murder. And that, in short, is the setup to how Daredevil got put in prison. But wait, there's more, which also pours into Kingdom Black, because on top of this happening, there's also been some significant changes. Because while Murdock was in prison, Elektra then broke into the prison, which drove the inmates crazy. But with Elektra coming here, she came to tell Matt that there's more important things that he could be doing rather than rotting in prison trying to be some type of martyr. But for him, this was much bigger, because not only did he do it to kind of punish himself, but in the grand scope he always knew that whatever the outcome of this trial would be, that the outcome would affect other heroes and cause them to be more careful, and hopefully better in some type of way. But as far as the details that Elektra had came to share with Matt, which was that recently her and Stick had found a book just outside of Jericho that had contained thousands of years of information about the Hand, including how to actually finally defeat them. And as the book mentions, the Hand had long ago had a hidden encounter, which was the Fist, with the Hand being the darkness and the Fist being the light. And I'm not really sure why she didn't take that info to Danny Rand, but okay. But going further into detail, the Fist requires a queen and a king. And at that part, Matt was just like, okay, I see where this is going, lock me back up. But with Matt taking that stance, he really just doesn't trust Elektra, because even when they teamed up, she like still manages to kill someone, which is kind of what assassins do. But even in the past, when she has shown signs of good intentions, she's often reverted back to her darker nature. And because of that, Matt tells her, like, if she's truly done, if she's truly tired of the darkness, then she's got to prove it. But for Elektra, the solution of how to prove this to Matt, it doesn't come to her right away. But not long after, when Elektra runs into this homeless woman who she helps out by giving her $5,000 necklace, but not long after, Elektra more or less comes to this idea when she passes this sign that says we are all Daredevil. And from that night moving forward, Elektra then took over as Daredevil, protecting Hell's Kitchen. But this is what sets up everything prior to this point, with Matt Murdock being in prison and still wearing the mask, but also in the case of Elektra, taking on the title of Daredevil so that she can prove to Matt that she meant what she said, and eventually get to the further details of the whole king and queen thing, because that book further goes on to explain that one of them gotta die, and she totally skipped that part when she came to visit. But with Daredevil, where it crosses over into King in Black and Matt's in prison, he kinda tries to blend in a little bit and not let people know that he's blind, and with doing so he avoids reading or watching TV with others, and for the most part just listening and knowing who's around. But with doing this, another inmate by the name of Marcus, who's really just trying to help him out, and he goes over and he tells Daredevil, like he's freaking everybody out, sitting over here just looking and not talking to nobody, and Marcus is just trying to help him out. Like he tells him like, look, it'd be less awkward if you just started a fight or something. And like a lot of these dudes, they don't like him. Like Daredevil put plenty of these other guys in here, but Marcus just kind of gives him the heads up like, hey man, you kind of making it weird. And for a moment it almost feels like Marcus almost figured out Matt's identity, with him being one of the few heroes that keeps it a secret, of which on top of that he was allowed to wear his mask in prison. Because at one point Marcus is kind of like, you must be a doctor or a lawyer or somebody important or something, because other people like Luke Cage, they show their face. But with Marcus seeing that Daredevil's getting the hero treatment, he figures Daredevil's not serving his full sentence, because if they let you in here with the mask, then it's likely that they'll make other exceptions as well. But this conversation is then cut short when Daredevil is summoned by the warden, which is fortunate for Matt because Marcus was catching on pretty quick. But when Matt goes to speak to the warden, it doesn't pan out quite the way that either him or Marcus had expected, because as it turns out, the warden is the father of Mason Hollis, whom Daredevil had arrested after one of his psychotic breaks. And for that reason, the warden's gonna do everything in his power to keep Daredevil in prison for as long as he can. Bet you didn't see that coming. But after this, we then jump over to Elektra, the new Daredevil, who at this time is cleaning up the streets of Hell's Kitchen and doing her best not to kill anybody in the process. Like, she's trying, and she's reminding herself like old Elektra would have done it one way, but in order to convince Matt, she's got to find a way to stop crime without catching body yaddy yaddies left and right. But while she's continuing her patrol, one of the Knull dragons just swoops in, and it's from here where the Daredevil narrative just takes a dive into King in Black, because also in the case of Wilson Fisk, he gets called from a gathering to take care of the quote Class E situation, which from what we had seen were the details concerning Knull and what Mayor Fisk needed to do with the information that he had got from the Avengers. But right now it's kind of like the okay everybody, it's happening moment. And when Mayor Fisk gets outside to go in his car, like one of the Knull dragons just crashes on the street nearby. And when it does, it just breaks up and starts bonding with any and everyone nearby, including the security teams escorting him to the limo, as well as his head of security, Typhoid Mary, with Mayor Fisk barely getting out of there in time. But with this happening and this story just taking place towards the beginning of King in Black, like at this point in time for Elektra, who's Daredevil now for however long it may be, whether it's the next 2 years or however long it takes before Matt Murdock gets out, which I kind of feel like will be less than 2 years, just call it a hunch. But regardless of however long it may be, like right now where this story takes place toward the beginning of King in Black, Elektra is on her own. And though we know the way that she would have handled all this, with her protecting Alice from her mother who's been taken over by a symbiote, but had this event caught Elektra like a few weeks prior, even then she still would have helped, I'm sure, but back then it would have been more the assassin type of tactics. And especially at the point where Typhoid Mary just jumps in, and I'm sure Elektra's like thinking like, man, if I kill like 2 or 3 people, Matt will never know. And I mean, it's not like he gonna see it on the news or nothing. But speaking of Matt, like when the invasion jumps off, he's already been up all night, because just the sound of all the inmates talking in their sleep, and just the prison in general not being like his home, which is soundproof, because otherwise that's the only way that he could really get some sleep. But while he's here, he hears something break into the prison, and when he does, he tries to tell the guards. But when this happens, the guards, they're getting snatched up left and right. And at a glance when they see this happen, like they think it's Venom, which at first kind of feels like, well, oh, you see a symbiote, it's gotta be Venom. But at the same time, with the Venom symbiote being absorbed into Knull, and some of the people being bonded having the red symbol and some others having the white symbol, like it may or may not be something meaningful. But what we do know at this point is that the guards who have been bonded, they're definitely being controlled by Knull. But at this point, Matt gets Officer Baker to let him out of his cell, like just before Officer Baker gets knocked out. And from there, Matt, he does what he can to fight out the other guards who have already been bonded with these symbiotes. But even still, it's like a bad situation for him, because he's trapped in this prison with these things, and with trying to fight them off, he's really just trying to protect the inmates who are in here, who are more or less trapped under this attack as well. But then when one of the symbiotes begins to bond with him, he then begins to hear this voice as everything starts to fade fade to black, and as his voice speaks to him, it then introduces itself to him as the voice of Knull. And while Matt's being bonded, they have this back and forth for a little bit, where Knull is telling Matt what's happening, and Matt's like, why? And Knull lets him know, like, we're bonding so you can be better. And Knull asks him, like, don't you want to be better? And Matt responds like, I do. Well, I try. Like, God help me, I try. And it's then when this symbiote bonds with him, and Knull tells him, like, you are a man without fear, and I am pure power, but together, we are unstoppable. And from there, Matt Murdock joins Knull's army. And I'm not gonna front, it looks good on him. And even though, like, most of the heroes, when they get taken under by Knull, like, they kind of look the same for the most part, but I guess it's something about Daredevil with the eyes blacked out and the long horns that kind of just sets it off for me. And so now, real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the Patreons. Thank you guys for all of your support, and for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and let me know what you guys think about the nullified Matt Murdock, because really I thought we were gonna get something like this back towards like Absolute Carnage, but I guess for whatever reason they were saving it for King in Black. And I think back at the time with Absolute Carnage, it was more of just a variant cover, and that's it. But let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.